The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
The following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule the world!
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
Well, I must have not been paying attention.
I always do that. I just cut out Mel.
We can start over again.
Back. I mean, we don't have to. I could just also just put his music back in the background.
I guess.
The
Can you do
following
that?
was recorded in front of a live
Make it play
studio
again. I wanna
audience
hear it.
at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Here it comes.
This is the United Podcast Network.
The following
I just want to
program
meet the
is
woman who
closed
does that.
captioned for the thinking impaired.
She's on
By
Fiverr.
tomorrow, I will rule
I think she was like a Fiverr person or whatever.
Gone?
Outsourced.
He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new
Right,
therapy?
refresh this.
To start, press any key. Where's the any
It's the old
key?
one. But I think the old one cuts out halfway through the song, so.
Oh, come on.
Well, I must
Of course, on a day when I've got nothing to talk about, right?
Look at that. I just bought us
just talking.
2 minutes.
2 more minutes.
2 whole minutes.
Now, by the way, what's her name?
Repeat the question.
Agnes.
Agnes?
Oh,
And I listen more attentively.
We got to get her on the show. Can we get you to come on the show at some point, Agnes?
Something in all of
that?
nothing.
I don't care what you talk about. I just want you on my show. Yeah? All right. Okay.
it's pretty.
Maybe like right after the
Beautiful
election, we'll have
woman walking by.
Agnes come up on the show. My ratings will go through the roof.
Absolutely, they would.
They will burst through the atmosphere.
When you were busy slamming the door. I guess the things that pass for affection.
Waiting for my guest to get here. I literally have nothing to talk about today.
You got a couple things.
I do. I have a couple
got
of
a
things that I
couple.
could talk about, but I wasn't prepared to talk about them.
That shot me like a stone to the floor.
How far away from Halloween are we? 2 weeks from today is Halloween. I'll wait till we officially start to make that announcement. That's a pretty big announcement. Maybe we'll have Agnes come up today. Look, I don't even care what she talks about. She's so
She's at work.
goddamn hot. So would that be considered sexual harassment, technically?
No, I mean she's at her job. I'm pretty sure if they catch her over here doing a show with
Yeah,
you.
but like she promotes cigars and stuff. I just have her come up here to promote cigars. Like we'll merge the two. We'll make it work.
I see
See what I'm saying?
Are we like a couple of chuckleheads?
Right.
Was that was a very
Right?
that was a very sitcom we just banter and then instant.
I gotta tell you, I have never watched more podcasts in my life.
Yeah.
Like I'm so late to the game. I've been doing a podcast since before there were podcasts.
Yeah.
Now I'm watching everybody else's podcast and I'm seeing how they do stuff and I'm like, why aren't I doing it that way? And why ain't I doing this? And how come I'm not doing that?
I don't know.
Nobody else has a song at the beginning of the show that lasts more than 3 seconds. Right? Because everybody's got ADHD, so I might even cut most of the song at the beginning. Although it is fun to do the Baba Buzz, right?
Yeah, it is fun, but
Gives us a feeling of community. All right, let's get this show on the road. Wow, before I do that, I got to pull out my sponsors, right? And that list just keeps getting longer and longer. That's crazy, too. All right, let's get this show on the road. Hi, how you guys doing? My name's Tom Duggan with the Paying Attention Podcast. High atop, 2 guys smoke shop at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. I was supposed to have a guest today. I don't know if he's late or if he's not coming, but I sent him a text message a few minutes ago because I was going to be late and I haven't gotten an answer. So I don't know if he overslept. I don't know if he booked the wrong day or if he's on his way. I have no idea. But he is Joel Desolitz. He's a former Windham state representative, and I wanted him to come on and talk about the New Hampshire governor's race because really in Massachusetts, there's no race, right? There's really nobody running against Maura Healey. There's really nobody running against... You've got, I think, maybe one race that's contested. Oh, the Elizabeth Warren race is contested, but it's that guy Deaton, and he's got no shot. He's a Republican, and even though he's a never Trumper Republican, he's still a Republican. And in Massachusetts, you cannot win as a Republican. I know everyone's going to say, what about Charlie Baker? But Charlie Baker was not a Republican. And when Charlie Baker got elected, it was 12 years ago. Might even be 14 years ago with my Lawrence High math. I'd have to count that out on my fingers, right? So Today, you cannot get elected as a Republican in Massachusetts. You just can't. We've got maybe, I think, 4 state senators, maybe 3 or 4, I think it's 3 actually now, state senators that are Republican. And you might have, I'm going to give you a ballpark, not a real number. I'll try and look it up while I'm chatting to get you a real number, like it matters, right? But there's a lot of petty tyrants out there. If you get something that's not exactly right, I get emails on it. But I'm gonna guess that we maybe have between 9 and 12 Republican state reps in the whole state, right? So I thought maybe it'd be great to have Tom Deslitz come in because I'm not really up on the New Hampshire governor's race. I know what I would do if I lived in New Hampshire because I know who. I followed the primary on the Republican side, but I have no idea who the Democrat is. I know that she is, well, we'll talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about our sponsors first. We want to thank Century 21, McLennan Real Estate, Zany Pesh Law Office, Marsan & Son Construction, EIS Investigation and Gun Training. A free shout out to my good friend, attorney Paul Lambert, of Lambert and Randone, and I got to meet his partner too because I want to get both of them up on the show at some point. Tomo and Shaken Seafood, Clear Path for Veterans New England, AFC Urgent Care. I'm getting emails after having had Zaka on the show. I think my audience actually was surprised at how good he did while he was here, and I'll pass those along to him. I know he does watch the show. Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors. Prime Insurance, the Doug Mercurio Law Office, 11 Restaurant at 226 Essex Street in Lawrence, Chris's Barbershop in Salem, New Hampshire on Main Street, right above Sevmar, which is where I'm going right after the show. Enterprise Bank, we love Enterprise Bank so much. I'm going to be sitting with them Friday night at Karina's Gala, which we'll talk about in a second. W3ON, 4-Star Lighting, A&J Goodwin Plumbing, and my favorite new advertiser of all the new advertisers, Bonfire Wellness Center in North Andover, and I keep promising I'm going to get there, but my days get busier and busier and busier and busier every day. But I promise this week I will be there. By this weekend, I will stop in at Bonfire Wellness. So I wanted to have Joel come in and talk about the governor's race. I know that the woman that he's running against is the mayor of Manchester. So one of the things I wanted to ask him, and I hope he does show, Joyce Craig is her name, and she's the mayor of Manchester, New Hampshire. My daughter lives in Manchester, so I'm in Manchester once in a while. Not as much as I probably should be, but I'm there once in a while. And I talk to a lot of people. I'm a member of TMF who feeds the homeless in Lawrence, and so I know a lot of people in the, for lack of a better phrase, the homeless industry. You know, people who are, it's a very small group of people that help the homeless in New England. And we all kind of almost all know each other at this point because there's a lot of crossover. People that are helping the homeless in Lawrence, then on Wednesday nights will go Thursday night to Lowell and they'll help the homeless in Lowell. And then on the weekends they'll go to Manchester, New Hampshire, and they'll help the homeless in Manchester. And then over, the end of the weekend, they'll come back into Lawrence and they'll help us. So it's a very small group of people that work together to help the homeless, to try and bring them food, try and bring them blankets, try and help them get clean if they want to get off the streets. And so I looked at when I knew Joel was coming on, I looked at some of the numbers from Manchester, New Hampshire. Wow, is she doing a horrible job? I don't know how she runs her police department. I don't know how she runs her DPW. I don't know what the taxes are like. I haven't done any of the research on that. But when I'm judging on a mayor and how much they care about the people that they're supposed to be in charge of, I look at the people at the very bottom of that rung. And that's the people who are sleeping on the streets. That's the people who are sleeping in tents. And I look at what's going on in Manchester, New Hampshire. And if you think Lawrence is a cluster, Lawrence is like light years ahead of Manchester, New Hampshire as far as what is provided for the homeless and the government assistance to help the homeless not be homeless, and the effort by government employees and elected officials to get addicts off the streets and into detox, to get them clean. If you care about the people that you represent, if you get elected to office, your primary duty is not to illegal aliens who just got here from El Salvador 20 minutes ago. Your primary duty is not to people from Massachusetts. It's not people from Canada coming into your state, and it's not people in Europe. It's the people who elected you. It's the people in your state. It's the people who are the downtrodden, and and really, when you're an elected official in any community in any state, your job, your primary job, is to take care of the people at the bottom of the rung. And if you're a mayor, it's the people at the bottom of the rung in your city. If you're a governor or a state rep or a state senator, it's the people at the bottom of the rung in your state. And if you're a congressman, it's the people at the bottom of the rung in your country. And unfortunately, the Democrat Party does not give two shits about the people at the bottom. And so I'm going to jump around a little bit, hoping that he's coming in. And if he doesn't come in, then we're going to talk about the ballot questions in Massachusetts. That's my backup. So yesterday, before I went to TMF to help feed the homeless with Michael Gorman, who's just such a great kid, and all of his volunteers are great, Kevin Doobie, who's the chairman of the Republican Town Committee in North Andover. Yes, it's true, there are still Republicans in North Andover. He showed up at my office with a big bag of socks. And he said, Tom, I know it's starting to get cold, and I followed you last year when you were going out and you were helping the homeless and you were asking for certain items. And I know, because I paid attention, that one of the things that the homeless need as soon as it starts getting cold, they need socks, right? Because when it gets cold and then it rains, their socks and their shoes get wet, and who wants to walk around with cold, wet socks? I was grateful. We chatted a little bit. He hung out in the office. We chatted a little. And then when he left, I started thinking, when was the last time a Democrat of any stripe, the head of the Democrat committee in Lawrence, the head of the Democrat committee in Methuen, the head of the Democrat committee in North Andover, showed up at my office or came to TMF with a case of socks for the homeless, with hand warmers for the homeless, with a gift card to Dunkin' Donuts for the homeless, with pouches. One of the things that the homeless really love, we can't keep them in stock enough, is those tuna packets. You used to be able to get tuna in a can, and then all of a sudden they figured out how to put them in these cellophane packets. So there's tuna packets, and there's now chicken packets that they've come out with. The homeless love them because they can put them in their tents, and they can sit there for a month, and they don't go bad. And also, most homeless people don't have can openers. So you can't give them a can of tuna fish or chicken because they can't open it, right? I started thinking, like, when was the last time the state rep, Adrian Ramos from North Andover, showed up at my office or showed up at TMF and said, here, I want to help? Okay, let's say they don't have the money to do that. Even though we know Adrian Ramos is a multimillionaire, let's say all of her money's tied up and she has no liquidable cash. When was the last time she showed up at TMF and said, hey, I don't have anything to contribute, but I'd like to serve the food. I'd like to help you set up. Never. Now, some of the Democrats in Lawrence, because everyone in Lawrence is a Democrat. There's like 2 Republicans in Lawrence in the whole city. Francisco Polino is very helpful as a state rep. Stephanie Infante has been somewhat helpful. Vivian Marmol has been somewhat helpful. Estela Reyes has been somewhat helpful. But outside of Lawrence, where's the Andover state rep? Where's the Andover state senator? Where's the North Andover state senator? Where is the head of the North Andover Democrat Town Committee? Where is the head of the Lawrence Democrat Town Committee? And yet, at election time, when they're looking for your vote, the Democrats all paint the Republicans as careless, heartless bastards who don't care about the downtrodden and don't care about the homeless, because the Republican position is, let's stop raising people's taxes for government programs for the homeless because none of it gets to the homeless. Right? Lenny Mira wrote a great column about that a couple of months ago when he went after Kelly Frazier, the homeless coordinator in Lawrence. And one of the points that he made was, hey, look, not for anything, but when Republicans say these programs don't, the money for these programs go to the friends of the politicians that allocate the money for programs, but the homeless don't benefit from it. We don't have fewer homeless on the streets now than we had 5 years ago after spending billions of dollars. We have more. It's funny when those Republicans come up for re-election, the Democrats paint them as heartless. You don't care about the poor. You don't care about the downtrodden. But let's look at Massachusetts, and then we're going to segue back into Manchester for a second, because Lawrence and Massachusetts right now is mirroring Manchester because they're all Democrats. They're all the exact same platform. None of them have an idea in their head that's different than the others. They're all just following the party platform. And you look at Elizabeth Warren. Look, she's our U.S. Senator. She came in with her limo 4 years ago into Lawrence with a whole bunch of white people from Andover standing behind her. None of them were from Lawrence, like maybe two were. Other than that, everybody else is some white liberal, suburban type standing behind her as she made her announcement in Lawrence about how she was going to run for president and how she was going to help the poor and the downtrodden. I followed her limo when she got to the Lawrence line, and I followed her into Lawrence. And then I sat outside the rally and I watched it on my phone because there were live TV cameras there. I had no need for me to go in. And then I followed her limo back. She drove by no fewer than a dozen homeless people on her way in and the same route on her way out. Did she stop, pull over, and give one of them a sandwich? No, she did not. She did not. But she advocates for all of these homeless programs. And when you look at all these homeless programs, they grow government. These programs are spending millions of dollars, but none of the help actually gets to the homeless. And how do we know? Just look at the product. Look at the final answer. Look at how many people are homeless today and how many people were homeless when she ran for president 4 years ago. Exponentially higher. And now we're importing more homeless people, illegal aliens coming across the border who they don't have a home to go to. They're coming here with no home to go to. So we're importing more people who are homeless. And here's the real rub, and this is, a pox on Joyce Craig, who wants to spend lots of money on illegal aliens, but not homeless people. We're spending billions and billions of dollars to house illegal aliens who just got here because they have nowhere to go, while we are ignoring veterans who are sleeping on the fucking streets of Lawrence. You have people who were born in this country, who served this country, who paid taxes in this country their whole lives. And now they're in their 40s or their 50s and something happened. They lost their job. They had PTSD. Something happened. They got addicted to something. And now they're sleeping in a tent on the banks of the Merrimack River in Lawrence. And we got told year after year after year that there wasn't enough money to take care of those people. We got told year after year after year that our state budget in Massachusetts couldn't handle housing all of those Americans who are sleeping on the streets. Until all of a sudden, another 20 million illegal aliens came streaming across the border with no place to go, and suddenly we found millions of dollars to house them. So when I look at Manchester, and I don't know anything about Joyce Craig other than she's a Democrat, and their homeless numbers, and I look at what she has done as the mayor of Manchester for the homeless, and I say I would never want this woman in charge of anything ever again. Because I look at the numbers in Manchester, and they're horrible. And the increase in homeless in Manchester far outpaces Lawrence. And Lawrence I'm using as the canary in the coal mine because Lawrence is the worst of the Merrimack Valley. If you live in Andover and you live on Ruggiero Way and you have a $2.5 million home, and you lose your job, your wife divorces you, she takes you for everything you have, and you end up on the streets, you're not sleeping in a tent in Andover. You end up going to Lawrence. If you live in Methuen and you end up homeless for whatever reason, you're not sleeping, for the most part, there's a few in Methuen, but for the most part, you're not sleeping in a tent in Methuen, you're going to Lawrence and you're sleeping in a tent in Lawrence. You're at the Daybreak Homeless Shelter in Lawrence. So Lawrence is where all the homeless people go, and why do they go there? Because the perception is that that's where the services are. It's not where the services are, I can tell you that for sure. There are really not a lot of services for homeless in Lawrence, but that's the perception that there's all of these services for the homeless in Lawrence. So what happens is Methuen's homeless end up in Lawrence, and Andover's homeless end up in Lawrence, and Salem, New Hampshire's homeless end up in Lawrence, and North Andover and Drake's homeless end up in Lawrence. Lawrence doesn't have the money to handle all of those homeless people, so they go without food, which is why we have TMF in the first place. If these people were all doing their job, there would be no need for TMF. Mike Goldman wouldn't have any homeless people to feed, but he does. And so the officials of Lawrence look around and say, we can't be doing anything for these homeless because if we take 10 off the streets, there's 20 more coming in thinking, oh, look, they got 10 off the street. There's services in Lawrence. But there really aren't. Here's what you got in Lawrence. You got TMF serves 3 hours a week, serves a dinner at the Buckley Garage on a Wednesday night. You've got Cor Unum, which is over at St. Patrick's Church, which serves, I think, lunch and dinner or breakfast and dinner every day. They serve food. So if you are hungry, you can get food. You have Bread and Roses on Newbury Street, which I think is open 4 nights a week, that serves food. And you've got Lazarus House, which actually takes people in, but you have to be a family. You've got to be a woman with children, or you have to be an intact family. Individual men can't knock on the door and stay there overnight. Then you have the homeless shelter, the Daybreak Homeless Shelter, run by the Greater Lawrence Psychological Center, which is, by the way, having a fundraiser Friday night at Salvatore's. Please donate to that. All of that money goes to help battered women at Pegasus House, women on the run at Women's View, or the homeless at the Daybreak Homeless Shelter. They're all under the Psychological Center. Now, the Psychological Center has a max capacity of 55 homeless people that they can house a night. Technically, it's supposed to be 50. They go over capacity. That's the number of people sleeping at Daybreak. There's another 200 to maybe 220 homeless people sleeping on the streets of Lawrence that can't fit at Daybreak. Now, if you go to Daybreak, it's not a building. It's not an old school. It's not a renovated church. It's 2 trailers that have been welded together, like 2 trailers like you would see in Alabama that that a tornado wiped out, right? Welded together. And when you step inside, you can feel the place rocking. It's not like a stable building. She's been begging the state and city officials for a building forever. When Brian DePina got elected, I sat down with Brian about a bunch of different things to help TMF get the bus station and to also try and help Karina get a building. Never got a building. The homeless coordinator tried to siphon $200,000 to her own nonprofit, but didn't do shit for the homeless shelter over at Daybreak. Let's parlay this back to Manchester, New Hampshire. What is the Manchester, New Hampshire, Joyce Craig, mayor, doing for the homeless? Not a whole lot. So why would I want her to be governor? The next question becomes, if we don't want her to be governor, well, the only other person running is Kelly Ayo. What's she going to do for the homeless? I'm not too sure she's going to be much better. But she is a Republican. She is fiscally conservative. She might be able to find a way to reduce spending in another area to raise funding to try and help the homeless. And here's the thing with the homeless. It's much less about the funding. You know, in government, everything's supposed to come down to funding. Whenever you ask a government elected official anything about trying to solve a problem, the first thing they think about is money. Who's going to pay for this? How much can we get? How much can we put into a program that we can hire our friends to administer? Right? That's what they're always thinking. But for the most part, to solve the homeless problem, you don't really need all that much money. What you need to be able to create an environment for these nonprofits that help the homeless, that help the addicted get clean. And then you need to help these public-private partnerships find them housing. And we have a huge housing shortage right now, partly because we have 20 million illegal aliens streaming across the border, taking up a lot of the housing. So I was hoping Tom would be here. He's not here. Did my thing die on me here? I don't know what happened. So I was going to go. I guess we'll have to pull this out. One more thing. I left off on the sponsor list Patrick's Eatery, and I left it off on purpose because Patrick's has changed their name. Believe it or not, he just opened, right? But he's changed his name. And let me make sure I get this right. I don't want to get it wrong. Patrick's. It was Patrick's North Shore Eatery, and now it's something like Better Burger Bar. It's the Better Burger. I got it right. The Better Burger Bar. So Dean Chongas, who has been on the show with Amanda Panda and Emmett and someone else, decided to change the name of Patrick's, which used to be Harrison's. And what they did was they split the business in half. So Harrison's is back to being Harrison's. That's on the north side of the building. And Patrick's Eatery is now the Better Burger Bar. So I will do a story in the next Valley Patriots because it's going to be very confusing for people at the beginning of this change of branding for it. But the food is still great. I still go there. I still get the Harrison's beef, and I still get the hummus and the grape leaves because Jim Monier is still working there. All right, so now we've got this back up. Let's talk about in Massachusetts. Let my mouth catch up to my brain. So we've got five ballot questions in Massachusetts. Now, normally I would do this, the show before the election. The election is, I believe, November 5th. The show before the election would be Halloween, the 31st of October. However, breaking news. We have got a tremendous guest for you for that day. And she's coming in live into the studio. And that is Massachusetts State Auditor Diana DiZoglio is going to come on the show and talk about her ballot question, which is ballot question number 1, which is to audit the legislature. So I've given this to you before. I'm going to give you just a little bit. I know we've got, believe it or not, only 11 minutes left of the show. She used to be an aide for a state rep named Paul Adams, and when she was an aide for Paul Adams, she was sexually harassed and sexually groped. She was then fired for complaining about being sexually groped and sexually harassed. And when they fired her, they gave her a huge paycheck and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. And what that means is she can't go to the press and say, the person who groped my breast was state rep so-and-so. She's not allowed publicly to announce who it was that sexually harassed her or sexually groped her. And when that was over and she signed all of that, she had buyer's remorse. She had next day regret. And through that, we all learned, because I remember writing the story at the time, we all learned that there was a secret slush fund in the Massachusetts legislature to pay victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault to make them sign non-disclosure agreements so the state reps that were sexually groping and sexually assaulting women could continue doing it with impunity and pay off these women with your tax money because they had these secret slush funds that nobody knew they had. Now fast forward to Diana runs for state rep and wins. She runs for state senate and wins. And when she's in the state senate, she gets a measure passed to make non-disclosure agreements illegal in the legislature. But they still have these slush funds. They still have the money on the side. And by the way, not just for this, they have slush funds for a whole bunch of other stuff too. So now fast forward to she goes from state rep to state senator, and now she's the state auditor. Wow. And I'm laughing because she did this on purpose. Her mission in life after what happened to her was to expose the people who did what they did to her. And God bless her for doing it. So when she became the auditor, she tried to audit the legislature to publicly expose all of the slush funds for all of the sexual debauchery that was going on in the State House. I'm not talking about like guys that were going out to dinner with their aides afterwards. I'm talking about sex going on in the State House, sexual harassment, sexual assault in the State House during work hours by elected officials who we all know by name. And so she tried to audit the legislature, and the governor's office tried to put a stop to it. And certainly the legislature tried to put a stop to it. So question 1 on your ballot in Massachusetts on November 5th, I believe, on Election Day, is she goes all over the state and gets the signatures to get a ballot measure to audit the legislature. And let me tell you, I think it's going to pass overwhelmingly. The problem is, and we want you to vote for this. I mean, if you live in Massachusetts, yes on 1 across the board. I'd like to see this be 100%. Any woman in Massachusetts that votes against this should be ashamed of themselves once you understand why she's doing what she's doing. Here's the problem. I was the president of Mass Citizens Alliance. My job back in 1999-2000 was to get signatures to put gay marriage on the ballot. We got the 300,000 signatures that we needed to put gay marriage on the ballot. We got it on the ballot. But after it passed, the legislature had to approve it, which means when Diana gets this passed on the ballot in November, the legislature is going to have to approve it. And you know, and I know, they're not going to approve it, which means she's going to have to take it to court. And that's probably going to end up at the Supreme Court at the state level, maybe even at a higher level depending on how it gets ruled. But let's back Diana, okay? Let's get behind her because she's doing the work of the angels. She's doing God's work here. She really is. That girl, I have so much admiration for her. She has been single focused since she realized. She was young. I think she was 22. She was an aide for a state rep, and she thought all these people were gods. Like, she sees them on TV all the time. She had such admiration. She was in such awe that she was able to work for a state rep in the state house, like a historical building, all this other stuff. And then they sexually harassed her and sexually groped her, and then fired her for complaining about it. And she's still pissed off. And I'm glad she's still pissed off, because look at the good that has come from it. Sometimes people become victims of something and they just become angry. And it affects their life in a negative way. Diana has been able to take this and turn it around. And I'm rooting for her, 100%. So I'm asking all of you, all of my supporters, all of my followers, even if you don't like me, but if you watch the show or you read the Valley Patriot, you should be voting yes on one, no matter what your political party is and no matter what your political stripe is. 6 minutes. We could do this in 6 minutes. Question number 2 is, should we get rid of the MCAS requirement in Massachusetts? Kids who graduate from private or public schools in Massachusetts have to pass the standardized test, which measures not the students. Let me put it this way. There's a reason that the teachers hate MCAS, because it's the one thing that allows us to measure whether or not they're doing their damn job. Let me give you some soft numbers, because I don't have the hard numbers in front of me, but I remember doing a very in-depth research project story on Lawrence. I'm going to just use Lawrence as an example because I know more about Lawrence. The vast majority of kids that start as a freshman at Lawrence High School do not graduate. It's well over 50%. Of those who do graduate, well over 80%, I'm going to say maybe even into the 90s, but I'm going to lowball it just so that nobody's accusing me of exaggerating. Well over 80% of the kids who graduate from Lawrence High, who make it through 4 years, who pass the MCAS test. These are the kids who pass the MCAS test. Well over 80% do not go on to college. They do not go on to a 4-year college. That means less than 20% of the kids that pass the MCAS test go on to a 4-year college. Do you know the number of kids who graduate from Lawrence High School and go to college? Now, we whittle this down to a very small number, right? Less than 80% of the kids graduate. Less than 50% of the kids graduate. Less than 80% of those who graduate go to a 4-year college. And more than 90% of the kids that go to a 4-year college make it to their second year. What does that tell us? Kids from Lawrence are stupid? No. Does that tell us that Latinos aren't as smart as white people? Absolutely not. What it tells us is that the teachers in Lawrence aren't doing their job. That's what it tells us. They graduated even with the MCAS standardized test requirement. Less than 90% of the kids who get to college from Lawrence High School make it to their second year in college. Because when they get there, they're unprepared. Imagine getting into college, you have to take a calculus class and you've never had geometry. Imagine having to read the Iliad and the Odyssey, but you've never read Shakespeare in high school. That's what these poor kids are dealing with. And I don't blame the kids. It's not because the kids are stupid, it's because the teachers aren't doing their jobs. Now, we can have a long discussion about why the teachers aren't doing their jobs. We can. In fact, I'm working on a story right now about the Methuen teachers and how they're getting screwed by the city of Methuen. And a lot of them sat down with me and were like, we're a little surprised you want to do this story, Tom. We know what you think of public school teachers. You're right. In general, I don't have a lot of respect for public school teachers. However, that doesn't mean that I can't recognize that these particular teachers are getting screwed, because they are. But overall, in general, public school teachers are not doing their job. And again, we can argue whether it's their fault or the administration's fault or their local mayor's fault or whatever it is. But it doesn't matter who's at fault. What matters is that it exists. What matters is that the teachers aren't doing their job. So I'm saying we should keep the MCAS, because if you don't have an MCAS, Look at how few kids are getting educated with the MCAS. Can you imagine what those numbers are going to be if you get rid of it? The teachers saying, "Oh, we shouldn't be teaching to the test." Well, isn't that what teaching is? You teach kids, then you give them a test on Friday. Like all week, you do chapter 1 on, I don't know, the Civil War, and then on Friday you have a test. You're teaching to the test. Isn't that what school is? They invent these phrases, teaching to the test, like it's a bad thing, like that, like we've never done this before. And in the history of America, that's all we've done is teach to a test. You teach kids grammar in their English class, and then you give them a test. You tell them to read the first chapter of Tom Sawyer, and then you give them a test. And what does the test measure? The test doesn't measure how smart the kid is. The test measures how well the teachers did their job. And that's why teachers, public school teachers, do not want MCAS overridden. So they want you to vote no on 2. I'm asking you to vote yes on 2. Wait, let me make sure I got that right. Then I want to screw that up. All right, whichever one it is, you want to vote to keep MCAS. I think it's yes on 2, but sometimes they word the ballot questions like, do you want to get rid of it? And then yes would be to get rid of it. But when you look at that question 2, you want to vote to keep MCAS. All right, question 3, ride share unionization. We got a minute and a half. Maybe I can do these last 2. You got these Uber drivers. They're not getting paid a lot of money. I don't know how these apps got away with doing what they're doing. They're totally supplanting the taxi industry, which is being destroyed by these rideshare apps. The government wants to be able to unionize the workers so they can tax their union dues. That's what that's about. So I'm saying no on question 3. And by the way, if you vote yes on question 3, the next time you use an Uber, it might be twice as much money. Because if they unionize, it's going to cost more money for the customer to get a ride somewhere. Question number 4 is legalizing psychedelics. If you love your children, you vote no on legalizing psychedelics. I hear that there's reasons for medical reasons and people with PTSD and veterans. You can get any prescription for any drug that you want if you need it medically, if you go to a doctor and get a prescription, and that's what you should do if you, for some reason, need a psychedelic. Like psychedelic mushrooms, LSD, there's no need for you to use it recreationally, and there's no need for you to have it medically. But in that 0.01% of the cases, if you've got some kind of crazy PTSD symptom, and the doctor thinks that's going to help you, let your doctor give it to you, but you shouldn't be able to go to the corner and buy it and then turn around and hand it to a kid. So if you love your children, even if they're your adult children, you're voting no on question 4, which would legalize psychedelics. I know we got 8 seconds left, right? Let me see if I can fix this last one. All right. Number 5, this is the big one, so I'm going to try and spend at least a minute on it, right? Number 5 is the big one, besides number 1. I know that people who work for tips have been complaining and bitching for the last 20 years that they don't get paid enough. And they're not wrong. They don't get paid enough. I used to be a waiter. I used to be a busboy. I spent most of my teens and 20s working in the restaurant industry. I've worked in kitchens. I've washed dishes. I've done everything you can imagine. Because in my generation, we actually worked. Today's generation, they don't want to do any work. But in my generation, we actually worked. And the people who work for tips don't get a lot of money. They do get screwed, and they get screwed in their taxes at the end of the year, too. And now the restaurant owners have found a way to screw them even more. I'm not going to mention the restaurant just yet because I'm going to do a story on this in the next couple of months. I was at a restaurant in North Andover, and I always ask the waitress, who was great, do you get to keep your tips or do you have to pool your tips with other servers? And she said, no, we have to pool our tips. So I asked her if she had Venmo, and she did, and I asked her to give me her Venmo, and she did. And I waited till the next day. I put 0 tip on the bill. I said, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you. But 0 tip on the bill. She looked at me funny like, I'm never going to see this guy again. He's full of shit. And the next day, I Venmo'd her $50 to herself, personally. So not only are these tipped workers getting screwed by people who don't give them tips, by the IRS, by the Department of Revenue in Massachusetts. But on top of that, you've got these scurrilous business owners who make them pool their tips. And you know and I know that when all that money gets pulled together, a little gets siphoned off for the owner, and a little gets siphoned off for the bartender, and a little gets siphoned off for this guy. And then maybe, and the other problem with that is you have a really good tipper, I give her $50. But you get a really bad tipper over at the next table, and the guy leaves her 0. So now when you add them together and you pool the two together, they both get $25. How is that fair? The bad waitress got 25 and the good waitress only got 25? So they want to increase the minimum wage as what they're paying for these tipped servers for them. First of all, it's because the government wants more money. If they're getting paid more on their wage end, that means they're paying more in salary tax. They're paying more in income tax. And that's what the government is doing. It's the government trying to get more money. That's all it is. Because here's what happens. If the restaurant owner has to pay their servers more in their base pay, then the restaurant owner is going to raise the price of the food. I mean, it's only common sense. So I'm saying no on 5. I'm saying no on 5, minimum wage tip for workers. And by the way, here's what I encourage you to do. Sometime this weekend, I want you to go out to dinner. And I want you to ask your waitress how they're voting and vote accordingly. What do you think about that, Chrissy? We filled the whole show, even though my guest didn't show up.
Yep, still not here.
Right?
I thought maybe at the hour.
I thought he would too. I thought
Yeah, I
he'd
was
walk
like,
in
right at the
halfway
last
through the
minute,
show.
perhaps.
But who knows? He might have had an emergency. We don't know, right?
Don't know. Hopefully everything's okay. But yeah.
So we are going to have Diana DeZaglio is going to come in, and I'm going to push her hard because I know she doesn't like to talk about why she's doing what she's doing because she's kind of emotionally past it. But it is her motivation for doing it. She's got a great motivation. I think the biggest mistake that Paul Adams and the legislature and the Speaker of the House of Massachusetts ever made was screwing over Diana DeZaglio. Mm-hmm. I mean, you screw over people all the time, and every once in a while you just screw over the wrong person, and she was the wrong person. Now she's your state auditor, and she is working very hard to expose all of your elected officials and all of their sexual shenanigans, because you know that if she's able to audit them, it's not just a financial audit, it's a program audit. So she not only gets to find out how much money that they have in slush funds that we don't know about, she also gets to audit those bank accounts and find out where did that money go. Are they kicking it back to themselves? You know, and I know that some of it is. And so that's going to be a headline for the Valley Patriot like every day if those audits actually take place. The Herald will do it every day, but the Globe will never do it because they're on the side of the legislature. They're bought and paid for by the Democrat Party. So that's it. Those are your 5 ballot questions for Massachusetts. Hopefully we'll be able to get Tom Desolitz in here at some point before the election. I don't know that we have many days left before the election to talk about the New Hampshire governor's race. Not a big fan of Kelly Ayotte. Not a big fan of her at all. But when I look at Joyce Craig, the Manchester mayor, and I look at how she treats the people at the bottom of the rung in Manchester, I would never want that woman in charge of anything. I wouldn't want her in charge of delivering my newspapers, much less running the state of Massachusetts. So, I guess that's it. I want to thank our sponsors. We got, pull that back up. We've got Better Burger Bar, which used to be Harrison's, but we also have Harrison's, right? We have Prime Insurance, the Mercurio Law Office, 11 Restaurant in Lawrence, Chris's Barbershop, where I'm going after the show, Enterprise Bank, W3ON, Stadium Chiropractic, A&J Goodwin Plumbing, Bonfire Wellness Center, North Andover, Century 21, Zany Pesci Law Office, Marston & Son Construction, EIS, Investigation and Gun Training, Tomo and Shaken Seafood, AFC Urgent Care, and Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, not necessarily reflect the opinions of the
It was too
Studio
close to the
21
line. I screwed up
Podcast
the whole
Cafe,
thing.
The United Podcast Network, its partners or affiliates.